Today, we are fortunate to have an amazing guest. Adam Frazier is a vice president and head of New York leasing for Oxford Properties Group, the real estate arm of OMERS Pension Fund for retired police officers and city clerks in Ontario. If you're not familiar with Oxford, you certainly should be, as they're synonymous with trophy office buildings throughout the world. Specifically, they were pioneers in Hudson Yards and responsible for some of the most modern office towers ever constructed in New York City. Adam, thank you for joining. What's really going on?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm super excited to be here. This is my first showing of on a podcast. I don't know if it's called the showing or listening or whatever the right word is. But
following, hopefully.
Following, I guess. So I love podcasts. I love listening to them, and I love you guys. So it's great to be here.
Glad we could have you.
Thanks for being here, Adam. So first question we wanted to ask is, obviously you've been in the real estate world for quite some time. Can you just give us a little bit of background on who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are?
Sure. You guys know my name is Adam Frazier. I do head up leasing for us here for Oxford Properties in New York City. My background is really, I'm a Long Islander. So I was born in Huntington on Long Island.
Represent!
Yeah, exactly. So great town, grew up there. My folks are still there, and now I live in a town called Manhasset, which is on Long Island. So through and through Long Islander. My wife is also from Long Island. But I went to Bucknell University. After Bucknell, I went to work as a trader on Wall Street. So
I never knew that about you.
I worked at Solomon Smith Barney, which was then Citibank. And at Citibank, I was a trader. So I traded over-the-counter tech stocks or NASDAQ stocks, semiconductors specifically, and did that for about 5 years. So it was incredibly exciting. It started in 1999 at the dot-com bubble, boom and bust, and it was an unbelievable way to get to really know the business world. So
and the financial markets.
The financial markets in totality. So learning how to transact very quickly, learning how to understand all these different personalities. I was a kid. And the way to make money was to kind of hustle your way through and, understand where to take risk, how to talk to people, how to put people together very quickly to make transactions happen. So I did that for about 5 years. When I was there, a number of things happened. 9/11 happened. So that was obviously a very difficult time for Wall Street, but it was regulated when I was there. So 9/11 happened, so downturn in the market, but world was also regulated and decimalization occurred, which meant the bid and ask between the buy and sell of a stock went from 6 cents to a penny. So when your margins go from 6 cents to a penny, you sense when you're 25 years old that they're probably never going to change again. And it was time for me to leave. So I decided to apply to business school. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill to focus on real estate. And I chose to focus on real estate because it was like trading. And I love trading. I thought it was a way that you could see an asset, you could create value in that asset based upon the experiences that you had personally. There were barriers to entry with getting that experience, so you knew what decisions to make to help create value for that asset. And then that asset traded on a multiple. You could borrow money and you could get rent, and it would be ongoing, and then you could trade it. So I went from kind of a commodity world to a value add world. And that was what I loved the most about it. So I actually I worked at Boston Properties as an intern in Washington, D.C. in between my first and second year of business school. And I decided I was not going to go back to Boston Properties. After my second year, I was going to work for a company called Edens and Avant, which was a large mixed-use retail-focused development company.
But I'd imagine there's a plot twist here.
There is a little bit. So I worked in D.C. I went to D.C. Retail was phenomenal. I was a developer, so I was acquiring sites and developing them, but I was creating places. And that taught me a tremendous amount about real estate because I learned that you could change the smallest details and it changes the place in a huge way and creates enormous value creation, whether it's glass or sidewalks or where you put a fire hydrant or what what a telephone pole looks like, or the coloring of a light in a parking garage, it all changes the experience that people have. And so it was time for me to move out of DC. I was working around the clock. My wife got pregnant, my wife got pregnant. It was time to move back to New York. Boston Properties remained in my Rolodex. Called Boston Properties. They asked me to come be the development manager on 250 West 55th Street on 55th and 8th, and a development called 748th Avenue, which was on 46th and 8th. That was a partnership with Related. Came back up here to do that. It was right when we were acquiring the General Motors building in 125 West 55th Street, and 2 Grand Central Tower, and 540 Madison.
Okay.
And so I worked as a development manager for those 2 projects. This was beginning of 2008. The world collapsed. At the end of 2008, I learned how to undevelop projects because we had to unwind these huge behemoths. Andy Levin, who ran leasing, came to my door and said, "Hey, what do you think about doing some leasing? Because things are changing on my side too." I said, "That sounds interesting. I'm transactional. I love numbers, detailed construction. This looks like fun, and I think the revenue side of the business is how you create value." So I started to do leasing in 2008, 2009, had a dual role for a number of years, and got to do some of the most amazing things at Boston Properties with some great mentorship. John Powers, Robert Selsum, Andy Levin, Rob Silpy, Rob Schubert, some great names for me personally. And then there was an opportunity in 2014 I wanted to focus back on investments and acquisitions and help someone build their business with the experiences I had at a place like Boston Properties. And so I was introduced to by a gentleman, Andrew Trickett, who hired me to head up leasing for us. And it was an interesting time. We hadn't really gone into 450 yet. We hadn't gone into Olympic Tower. Hudson Yards was just the starting of a platform. And so since that time, it's been kind of a wild ride.
So let's talk about that for a second. So since joining Oxford, you've been heavily involved in the most significant project in the history of the country and maybe even the world, Hudson Yards. Can you tell our listeners about the scale of this project, your involvement, and how it has changed the landscape of Manhattan and office development forever?
Yeah, look, I think, one, it's been an incredible project to be a part of. We're doing about 11 million square feet of office in the first phase of the project. We are also building, about 1 million square feet of retail. And then there's 2 residential buildings that are being built. On top of that, we're creating an enormous place, a plaza with a huge, basically experiential sculpture by Thomas Heatherwick. And it has had quite an evolution. And, you bringing me onto this show caused me to kind of look back in terms of my days of leasing against it when I was in Midtown, and there weren't that many other places other than Midtown that you wanted to be at that time. And so, if I look back, we kind of always thought that, and maybe this was a little bit too narrow of a view, that the world was that was the edge of the universe. And then it was a hard place for people to go to.
I think everybody thought that.
Yeah. And I don't think we were alone. And we would say to people, hey, we'll send your tenant to go look at Hudson Yards, but you have to go try to get lunch, at Hudson Yards. And this was in 2010 or 11. And we'll see how many places you can come up with.
I remember going on hard hat tours with you over there when the buildings were going up too.
Exactly. So, the world has changed a lot. And I think what has really changed it is, one, you had some real pioneers that came along and joined the early movement, which was Coach, L'Oreal, SAP, Boston Consulting Group. And they were really the early adopters of what was going to be envisioned over there. Coach had already been over there, so it was a little easier for them to do. But
KKR leaving 9 West told a story.
KKR at 9 West was the story. Yeah. And that was, if I had to pick a point in time, which was the tipping point, to think of kind of Malcolm Gladwell, I would say that was 100% it. Time Warner came down, obviously, but having KKR go was was really a big flag on the success of the turning point of Hudson Yards. And I think there was just a bunch of things that were happening at that point. Boyce Schiller was what came along. You know, we started 55 Hudson Yards on spec effectively. And .72 then came, then Millbank came. And so it just, then the momentum really started to pick up steam.
So that brings me to my next question. So the velocity throughout the entire complex, even the ones that you're not involved in, has just been tremendous.
Yeah.
Do you sit here when you're looking back and scratch your head and just say, oh my God, like, I cannot believe this happened and happened so quickly? And not just that, what are some of the other hurdles besides getting tenants to come and see the site that you face during the different phases of the project and lease up?
So I think, look, change just happens and you're in it and it's past you before you know it. I mean, that is my experience with most things. When you think the world is at its end, all of a sudden you're kind of in the middle of the change and on the other side of the evolution, and you're kind of like, wow, that happened a lot quicker than I ever thought it would happen. You know, you look at any kind of event, you know, good or bad that has occurred. It's like you're in it and you're kind of like, oh, I wish I bought more, or I wish I did more,
Sure.
or how could I reset what I did? So it's not, I guess it's surprising how quickly it is, but at the same time, you know, it became something that people really felt, and now it's here, and you're like, how was it ever not here?
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of how I feel right now. I think in terms of the hurdles, like, our partners lead a lot of what we do at Hudson Yards. They've done a fantastic job. My role in the beginning was much more active, whether it was in the retail and or the office. And I got consumed with St. John's Terminal and all of those things. So I don't spend as much time on the Hudson Yards front as I did when I first joined Oxford.
So when you first joined, what was your role in terms of Hudson Yards?
Yeah, so I was the head of leasing for Oxford, and so representing and helping our partners and ourselves make decisions on certain elements, or, you know, deals would come in. We'd obviously analyze certain transactions and understand the strategic implications for doing certain deals or the economics along with those deals. So, you know, it's not like me to be, you know, kind of in a shotgun seat.
Sure.
But it was more of a shotgun role along the way.
But you're a quick adapter, so I'm sure.
Quick adapter. You know, we can add value in certain spots, and I think, look, our partners were great. So it wasn't so much you're in the backseat. It was you had a chance to contribute and be a part of it.
Right.
It's amazing.
So on that note, but from more of a high level, as the head of leasing for New York, for Oxford, how involved do you get in the deal process? How involved do you get in the nitty-gritty of negotiating leases? And as a follow-up to that, do you get also very involved in the selection of agency teams for your buildings? And what do you look for in those agency teams? And what do you look for in the people that service you and your buildings?
Yeah, I get involved in the nitty-gritty. I am a hyper detailed person. You know, I want to make sure that a transaction carries a certain tone, and that it really is a reflection of who we are at Oxford and a reflection of me. So it's upsetting if that turned the other way because somebody else was more involved and I didn't like the tone of the way it works. And
Sure.
Look, our relationships are in a lot of way our value, and the lease transaction is our segue into having a relationship with a tenant.
Sure. Oftentimes a very long relationship.
A very long relationship. Look, we'd like to think of our tenants as clients. I mean, they are our clients, 100%. Right. Brokers are our clients. So it is incredibly important to me to have a fantastic experience as we go through that process. And you're going to have friction points along the way where we disagree. But that's the beauty of doing a good transaction, is working through that with a client, a broker, an actual business owner, or whatever that may be, to help yourselves through that so there's a great outcome on both sides.
And from a tenant's perspective, working with a good owner like Oxford.
Yes.
Right. And you've always worked for good owners. And I always say there's a difference between good owners and bad owners. And those friction points are something that people should really pay attention to, because some landlords are a lot easier to deal with when you reach those hurdles than others.
Right.
And how about in the selection of agency teams? How do you go about that process? What do you look for? What are the sticking points for you?
So for me, an agency team is an extension of me, and it's an extension of Oxford. I also think that buildings have different personalities, and so the agency teams are an extension of that building, and we want that agency team to reflect the personality of that building, and can show it in the best way, and can speak to it in the best way, and can really add value in how we market it and how we speak to it and how we find incremental pieces of value along the way.
Right.
And so for me, agency teams are absolutely important. I would not flippantly hire an agency team in any way, shape, or form. And I have, Lance would probably laugh at me when I say this, but I have kind of a matrix in my mind on how you make a decision on a particular building and hire an agency team. And those pieces are really, their personality, their financial, their marketability, their tour experience. And I think that it's like a sports team, right? I love sports. I played sports. I think that, each person needs to be able to play a different position on the field. Or there are key positions, and you need people to be able to play those positions. So getting the right mix so that becomes a very successful recipe for a tenant to speak to your building, see your building, be an extension of you, work really well with everybody. All of those things are incredibly important to me in how we find success and represent our brand, collectively.
Now, is Oxford committing to anything social media wise in terms of, proactively marketing spaces going forward? Obviously, hiring an agency team is super important, but as the way people consume information is changing, obviously we're sitting here on a podcast right now. Things are changing in the way that people are, viewing the markets and making decisions. And from a marketing standpoint, I know that I consume most of my information on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatever my phone pushes me during the day, besides the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, et cetera. Do you think that there should be a focus on those outlets going forward if you folks haven't already started thinking about that?
Yeah, there definitely is. So we just had St. John's Terminal, and we looked at St. John's as the workplace of the future. And it was really capturing, a certain type of client that was going to go to that building. And that client had certain workers that wanted to be at a building like that.
Sure.
And those clients, probably more so than most, were going to consume information in that way, right? And we were setting out a whole social media plan. Fortunately, we leased the building, and we didn't have to execute on all of it, but we did have announcements along the way that we did put out there through PR firms, and that was really important to us to do it in those avenues. But we did talk about, all right, how do you set the brand and set the communication for what your value proposition is of that building through social media? So people at my firm are spending time, including our CEO, really posting things on LinkedIn. And they are, I'm really impressed with it. Our president and CEO is really, they're spending the time to post things on LinkedIn, and every time I see it, I'm impressed. Sometimes it's video clips of themselves speaking and giving a better sense of what we're doing, and that shows our clients really who we are and what we're trying to present. Because look, messages come from the top.
Totally.
If it's starting from certain levels, it doesn't have as much momentum. So I think that culture's building in a big way.
Totally. People have information at their fingertips, and there's information overload. So if you have a good message to deliver and it's intriguing and captivating, who knows? That I think it's the way of the future for doing business, especially on our side of the business, finding tenants. Because I say this all the time, we're office space brokers, right? That's what I do for a living. Yeah. I broker office space deals for tenants. But guess what, Adam? Without a tenant, what do I do for a living? Nothing, because I can't transact. So how do I get the most visibility? But I think about it from the same standpoint. If I was doing agency work, right? How do I drum up the most leasing volume? And it's great to have relationships with brokers, and it's great to have relationships with tenants. But what about that one-off tenant that doesn't know about it that can ultimately take the entire building? And we worked on a deal together. It was one of my first deals when I first started hedge fund spaces. Yep. where we had a group that was in a commercial condominium
Yeah.
on Central Park South.
I remember that one.
That Googled office space and ended up moving to, in my opinion, one of the best buildings in New York City for 3/4 of the floor.
Yeah.
And they would have never had a broker or relationship. And I just think that our business has been so archaic and so slow to adapt to. When I think about technology, it's not just the technology systems that you implement as a firm, but from a marketing standpoint. And I just scratch my head sometimes and I think to myself, why aren't people posting videos of every single space you have in your portfolio?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer. So it maybe be helpful to hear your thought process on that because I've never really asked it out loud.
Yeah.
But I think it all the time, right? You have a pre-built unit. Oftentimes there are no videos. There's a floor plan. Sometimes there are pictures and you do beautiful pre-builts. How come there are sometimes no videos?
Yeah. So, one, I'd say you were a pioneer in social media because I remember that blog. Was it a blog?
It was a blog. Still a blog.
So, and I think that it's amazing. I love seeing your posts on social media.
Thank you.
And, the whole spectrum of them. And there are just a few folks like you in the business, all of whom I really love the most, and everyone can rattle off who their names are.
Yeah, I know they're.
And they're great, and you know who all of you are in case you're listening at some point. And you're, they're some of my favorite people in the business. And so I think that was incredible that you started that. And I remember that transaction very well. And there was a lot of fun parts of that we had from a friendship standpoint, from everything. That was just incredible. Those are the fun things, I think, with what we do. But the outward facing piece, so VTS, everybody knows VTS, right? Yep. And this is not a plug, or not trying to be a plug for them, but it's all true and factual that when I was at Boston Properties, Nick and Ryan and those guys came in to the office and they were like, we're going to, have videos of your space. And we took them up on it. I think we were the first or one of the first people that did it. And we believed in that concept in a big way. They had some cool, funky music, and the guy came in with the big standing camera, and it was, I think it was pretty successful. I mean, the way that they're going now is more successful, but I think what they're shooting for, and what people talk about in the business is having that visual display again. And Zillow does it now, and Redfin does it, and there are ways to show space a little differently.
Virtual reality, right. Augmented reality.
Exactly. So if the space is built, it's great. If it's built, then you should take a video. I agree. We should get better at doing that. And if it's not built or it's vacant, then we should do the VR or the AR so that you can understand what is happening. I think that's right. I think if you had to pick a thing that's going to happen in the next year or 2 years,
I agree.
I think you're pounding your fist in obviousness that it will be here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were slow to accept that. And then I was at a broker event, and I'll never forget, and a building was getting a brand new facade with floor-to-ceiling windows, and it was brick construction, and we put on these virtual reality glasses, and it showed you what the floor-to-ceiling windows were going to look like while you were in the space. And it was amazing, and it's an amazing technology. And I think it would be amazing to be able to walk through a floor with these glasses on and try to imagine what it looks like. So I agree, and I think it's totally going to disrupt the game. So while we're on the topic of assets and buildings, you guys own some of the most premier buildings in Manhattan. You have 450 Park, Olympic Tower, 650 Madison. Then you're a joint partner with Related at 10 and 30 Hudson Yards.
And 55 and 50.
And 55 and 50, that's right.
Mitsui's part of that as well.
How are you finding the market for the higher end and trophy Class A office product right now?
Yeah. Look, that market has been strong. I think it depends on where, right? I mean, you looked at the statistics that are out this year in terms of how much $100+ space has been done this year over another year. And it's grown every year since 2009, right? And I've been fortunate enough to work in assets that have that high level of rent, and have seen the velocity change from being a lot of renewals, right, and being in the Plaza District, to now being a lot of new deals and being everywhere.
Right.
And it's wild, right? And I don't know if I would have bet that would have been the case, 10 years ago.
Especially with where we were in the market.
Especially where we were with the market. So I think that it is incredible to to see. So I think that the velocity of transactions above $100 square feet is strong. It is happening. It's very healthy. And
look at the success of Park Avenue Tower.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a great example of what's happening.
What's your current vacancy rate?
We are about 98%. Yeah.
That's an amazingly stellar number from your perspective, sitting in your seat.
Look, we are that excludes some of the stuff at Hudson Yards, some of the development projects that don't register yet. But we're extremely fortunate, and we have some vacancy that will come within the next year, and mostly at 450 Park, but some large floors. I mean, some small floors, and I think that we're excited about the opportunities to do some new transactions there.
Hopefully, we could do some with you.
I would like that.
So speaking to that, while you were at Boston Properties, you worked on one of the largest office portfolios in New York City, including some of the highest profile buildings. You had the GM building, you had 510 Madison, you had 399 Park, 599 Lex, 601 Lex, just to name a few. How'd that gig differ from your role today?
So the gig differed from, Boston Properties is a fantastic company. The machine was unbelievable. You had great leadership, Doug Lindy, Owen Thomas, Mort Zuckerman. I had great partners, people that are senior to me that really were teaching me a ton. It was a company that was really focused on the United States, so Boston, New York, D.C., San Francisco.
Trophy buildings.
And trophy buildings. Yeah. So very much an operating company as opposed to an investment company.
Right.
So an operating company with a very strong development niche and expertise. When I came to Oxford, we were really a growing business, and we're seeking opportunities in a huge way to really grow in New York, into Boston, and into D.C. and San Francisco, similar cities to what Boston Properties was doing. We're also global, so London, France, Germany, all across Canada, Australia, and Asia, and that is a totally different beast than what I'm in now. So much more of an investment company as opposed to an operating and development company. And we are totally vertically integrated at Oxford. We have a huge development pipeline across the globe, and we are an operating company and investment company. So for us, it's just, I feel like we have a bit more different food groups, but having an investment focus where you're constantly looking at transactions and the business is growing in that regard, it's different than.
Do you get to see those investments also? Are you looking at those deals? Mm-hmm. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah. So changing gears a little bit, the market's obviously changing. The way people work is evolving. The whole landscape of commercial real estate, especially in New York City, is becoming more dynamic. You're hearing the buzzwords more with less, hoteling, all these sort of things going on. Where do you view the market right now? How do you see these changes continuing to evolve, and where do you see the market being in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that our market in particular,
Yes.
So our market in particular, I think that we've seen a huge change. One, we see a lot of different companies making strategic decisions to be here, more so than ever. This is not a lease expiration-driven market right now. Clearly, if you're expiring, you're thinking about, where you're going to go next. But look at all the groups that have come to New York in the last year on the tech side, gaining a lot of different employees. Whether it's Uber or whether it's some of the huge tech
Amazon,
groups,
Facebook,
Yep.
right? So I think what we are going to see is, I think that's going to continue because I think people are coming here because there's a big talent base. But what it's causing them to do is try to understand their ability to be flexible. Like, how much do they want to dip their toe in the water? What do they want to do? I think that it will lend itself to, the kind of the next wave of enterprise co-working world.
Right.
So I think that is going to be a big piece. And I also think that people just look at their space a lot differently now than they did, 2 years ago, in terms of what they want to do with their space.
Right.
Am I answering your question?
Yeah, perfectly. Okay. And let's talk about co-working for a second. One of the major changes we've seen on the brokerage side is the insatiable demand for co-working from smaller tenants. What are your thoughts on the business model from an ownership's perspective and personally? And do you think landlords like yourself will have to change the offerings, whether they're amenities, terms of the leases, et cetera, to compete going forward?
I mean, we talk about that a lot. I think that the co-working piece for us is the model is we'd prefer if they did long-term deals and that they were sustainable and they paid real rents and they had their kind of business outside of us. But I think that the model of where it's probably going is that, it's a bit of hey, these buildings need this as an opportunity in the buildings in some cases. Can the landlord replicate, positive experience from that regard, or
Sure.
do we need to outsource because that's not a business that we are either in or will be successful at?
Sure.
So I think that are some symbiotic relationships that will probably occur. Maybe at Oxford, I can't speak to it, but I think that there are certainly landlords that are seeking those relationships where you get the amenity, you have to decide on what that value proposition is in that amenity. Is it a gym? Is it co-working? Is
Conference
it
center?
Whatever it may be. And maybe there's something that we've never seen before and we need to think outside the box for achieving that. So can you operate it and who pays the money to build it? I mean, that's kind of the way that it works. And I think that is probably the most sustainable model. But then you run into what's the value proposition? What's the value impact on the building from having that set up? Because you don't have that rent plus 20 or 30 or 40 bucks a foot.
Right.
Maybe you do, but maybe that's not the way it's all working. So lease term is the next piece. Lease term, I think, is something that everybody is trying to understand. For us, it's hard to just do short lease terms because the financial markets just don't reward you for that, and that's I think where the friction point is, and obviously the cost to build out these spaces don't really lend themselves to making it an accretive exercise
Sure.
to spend all that money and do a 3-year term and then have to change it or add to it in a couple of years. So all those things I think have got to be worked out, and maybe that's just in the economics of it becomes just a natural piece of the economics of how you value a building for the future.
Right.
And each landlord has to make that determination when they go buy an asset.
And are you finding yourself being able to make qualitative and quantitative decisions based on data for adding amenities or making slab heights taller or, doing a slab cut to do an are you using technology to kind of leverage that?
So when we were doing St. John's, we spent a lot of time. I'll take your slab cut example because that was one that we did, and to some degree it was anecdotal. But when we were doing St. John's and we thought about the design, it's a 1.3 million square foot building, 12 stories, 100,000+ square foot floors.
How many buildings have 100,000 square foot floors in New York City?
I think there are 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think there's 6.
And in terms of, I did know all of this by heart, but there's 5 or 6, and most of them are old and have a lot of columns, and the ceiling heights are at 11 feet, 11.6, and the elevators are all over the place, and their cores are in many different places, or there's 5 of them, and they're not ideal. What we had at St. John's was we had a blank canvas, on 4 floors effectively, and which really became 3 because of an existing floor, and then we could build 9 stories above, or 12 stories or 10 stories, didn't matter. And we had to come up with the ideal floor plan that we thought was perfect for a tenant. And speculatively, and they're bigger than anything that you really ever see. And you usually are developing around constraints. So, usually the way the building is set up dictates where the loading dock is.
Right.
Usually it could be kind of obvious, right? How the cores are going to work or where the core is going to be situated because it's a 25,000 square foot floor or 11,000 square foot floor. And, some of these decisions are almost made for you. Here, we had none made for us. And so we had to go take an analytical approach to designing every component of that floor, which made it so much fun because we wanted to be able to stand in front of any tenant or client and their CEO or their employees or their brokers and say, we designed this corner because of these reasons. And we designed the elevators because of these reasons. And we put the entrance here for these reasons. There are 2 cores and 24 elevators, and we did it for these reasons because, this is what we're shooting to achieve. We want to improve the way that you are operating as a business. We are going to help you operate more productively than any other building in the market for these reasons. And we are going to help you be connected, and we're going to help your vertical transportation. So we went and got on a plane and traveled all over the world and took data on our own to help us make those strategic decisions.
That's amazing. So obviously St. John's Terminal, you brought it up a number of times. I know that's kind of your pride and joy right now.
Yeah, today it is, yeah.
I would love, so as someone who's not too familiar with the project, and I think the majority of our listeners probably are not, can you maybe just dive into that a bit for us and maybe just bring us up to speed on what exactly it is, where it is, and a little bit about the excitement and buzz surrounding it?
Sure. So for us, it's a 1.3 million square foot building. It's on the corner of Houston and Washington Street and West Street. And then there's basically a private entrance on the south side of the building that will be soon cut through. The terminal was a terminal that was built in 1934. It was about 880 feet long. We are peeling that back to about, forgetting all the footages, but I think 550 feet is its existing length because we've peeled it back past Houston Street, so it just is now south of Houston. It was the terminus of the High Line. So the High Line trains used to go into this building, used to house about 220 trains at one particular time. And the first floor is about 27 feet tall. Second floor is about 18 feet tall. Third floor is 14 feet tall. And then we have a outdoor deck, which is about 1.5 acres. And then we're building an overbuild above that. And that overbuild will be about 900,000 feet. And the floors on the second floor is about 150,000 feet. The third floor is about 100 because we put all the mechanicals on the third floor. And then above that, we will have the floors ranging from about 109,000 feet up to a 0 column, 40,000 square foot side core view of the Hudson River.
Wow.
So there are a number of different terraces on the building. There are 3 in total. So 4th floor, 11th floor, and 12th floor. And the building has about 2+ acres of outdoor space in total.
Wow.
I used to know this all by heart, but I can't remember the exact amount. But it is absolutely incredible. But what we are capturing is a product that is totally different than every other building that is being built out there. We were coming to the market when 20 million feet was being built, and we took on an opportunity to have a different value proposition than the other skyscrapers that are out there. So if you were a 500,000 square foot tenant or a 1 million square foot tenant, you could be on 5 floors or 12 floors that operate as floors that could be split in half. So they almost operate as a 50,000 square foot floor than 105 or 110,000 square foot floor. And they make your business be more connected than any other floor plate that could help you. So we put the cores in very strategic locations that foster that connectivity and help people do better at what they're doing and really instigate, casual collisions and neighborhoods that reside within this campus-like environment that we created. So when we went and toured around the globe, what we did was we went and met with all these different clients so that we could help understand why they liked the large floor plate and what was so good about it, what was too big, what was not too big, and challenge everybody, why they had done the things they did with their spaces, because we could really do anything in this location. And, we think
that's a great opportunity for anybody working on the development side to just have a blank canvas and be able to run with it.
And it's incredible that you guys had the foresight amongst all of these competitive buildings coming out of the ground in New York City, that you were able to implement the changes happening in the market on this very unique and very out of the ordinary site in Hudson Square.
Yep. Yeah. We were definitely, curious about it. We knew it was going to be received well. We challenged ourselves. Me personally, I remember there was a guy who is on our investment team, is a friend too. His name's Jeff Turkanis. And we challenged each other in a big way. He challenged me, to see what we could get in terms of rent. And Andrew Trickett, who ran investments as well, and Dean Shapiro, who runs development for us. We had some really long, hard conversations about what we could achieve here and what the opportunity was here. And everyone believed in it, just to what degree. And it wound up being something spectacular.
Well, there's a significant flight to quality, right? And this is a product unlike anything else that's out there. So you couple them together, you should be excited about it.
Yeah, and the team's executing on it great now. And we looked at it as the only building in New York City with a front yard. It's on a 550-acre park, Hudson River Park. It's very close to transportation, which was a misnomer, actually, initially, because people thought it was far from transportation, but it's actually incredibly connected to the four corners of the universe, as we called it. And it had something that the other buildings didn't have, which was this authentic, real, rich history to what it was. And people connected to that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. So speaking of change in the commercial real estate community, obviously New York has been slow to implement the new ways that business has been done. Not New York in particular, but commercial real estate has been slower to implement the new ways that business has been done with technology, with data, all of that. So obviously we've heard a little bit about the real projects and how Oxford has been very advantageous and successful in the implementation of new business practices. How else are you guys implementing new technologies and kind of becoming current with the market in your business?
So, from a leasing standpoint or a revenue standpoint, I'm actually leading this initiative that we have, which is basically helping transform our global leasing process. And that is used to help us be more connected, more scalable, more flexible, and operate using technology. So
almost like a CRM?
We'll do it with technology. Well, we're evaluating all the different technologies that are out there to see what we can do to help ourselves be more efficient, more productive, more connected as a workforce. So, we have evaluated a lot of different things. VTS is one of them. So that's a great tool to help manage, your program and how you can help be efficient in deals. I think that we all got our eye on what is going to happen when you're marketing space. Like what's going to happen on the CoStar front? How do you go and be more forward looking so that more outwardly looking, so people can understand what your inventory is.
Proactive,
and
transparency.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a lot more transparency in the business.
Exactly. So what do you guys, I would turn it around to you. I think that we're spending a lot of time trying to figure this out. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
I think that the brokerage system is broken, candidly. Yeah. I think if you want to buy a house nowadays, I brokered my last 2 deals by myself on Zillow or Trulia, finding my own house and brokering my deal.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I'm a real estate professional and I have a background in residential real estate. That's how I started my career. But I think that going forward, there should be some sort of transparency to what's on the market that's available to the masses. And I really believe it should exist. And, whether it's going to be a Zillow or a Trulia, or I know there's some digital brokerage firms that are trying to have their own proprietary database, I don't think that it's going to replace brokers. I think people are still going to need a broker to transact. But I think from an inventory perspective, I think people call bullshit most of the time when I say, this is all the inventory that works for you, when they give me strict parameters. And I think being able to empower my client by giving them the same tools that I have, but letting me do the legwork for them might be some sort of a solution.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of brokers don't want to hear that, but I think when that happens, and I think it's only a matter of time because it's imminent, I think the top 20% of brokers are going to stay around. Everybody else is going to fall off.
Yeah.
That's really what I think. I think empowering the end user is the most important thing going forward and creating some sort of transparency in the process and within the market.
Look, I mean, I think just starting at the most basic thing, you walk into a building and, those little dome cameras are on the reception desk, and they take your picture, and you get this horrible picture of yourself to go upstairs, and you walk around with this little
you don't know where to put it.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable. You look terrible.
Yeah.
And then it's like a sticker, and some just look terrible. It is just, I think it's a terrible reflection on the owner personally. And that's just one small little detail outside of even leasing space that you should be able to get right.
There should be some sort of iOS system or,
And there is. I think there is something.
Some buildings have it. Yeah.
But to that point, how about when a tenant has an incredible experience in one of your beautiful buildings and they're leaving and they want to lease space there?
Right.
Where do they go? So I think ultimately there should be some sort of plaque in the lobby, like a digital directory.
Yeah. Looking
for space, call XYZ, whoever your agency team is, or goes direct to you.
Do you think people lease space that way? I mean, you have seen it on your blog.
I think I say this all the time. Why go fishing with a hook when you could go fishing with a net? I think cast a wider net.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying do it in a tacky way. I think everything's digital nowadays, right? Everything. So it could be something as simple as, one of those scanner devices where you want space, scan here. This is everything available. Right. And it can be done tastefully and tactfully.
I know that we as a firm, weekly or bi-weekly, send around to the floor all the Savills subleases, right? All the subleases that we have available. And I think that some of the major landlords could send around to the brokerage community, not necessarily the tenant population, but the brokerage community, all upcoming availabilities and kind of give a sense of what's out there and have more transparency. And
upcoming availabilities. We're not talking about current availability.
Right.
Start thinking forward. You're seeing all these future commitments. There's a lot of big blocks of spaces coming available. And if you haven't been in the business long enough, you don't know that. But guess what? There could be that one kid in a bullpen that makes a call and he or she lands a whale, and they should be able to talk to those upcoming availabilities. Mm-hmm. But again, I think, historically our business has been so guarded in terms of information where there's not a lot of information sharing historically. Leases obviously aren't publicly recorded. People don't know when leases expire, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that all goes back to, the disruption of the status quo, which I think really needs to be reevaluated. And I think as the age gap really closes in, and as the people that have been in the business for 30, 40, 50 years start to retire or start to go on more vacations, the new generation is going to start thinking about things very, very differently. But your consumers also thinking about things very, very differently. Your tenants, the executive population's getting much younger, and the way they do business, the principals are much younger.
They'll demand it.
Yeah.
And I think from an Oxford standpoint, our president is tremendously, forward thinking. We hired a COO this year. His name's Dean Hopkins, and he's incredibly forward thinking. He's challenging us to go do all these things, and I think we should.
I think we should have a technology real estate panel, kind of like what YMWREA does. I think there should be people from all different companies that sit in a room. We have Plaza District meetings. I think there should be a young group of pioneers that try to effectuate change, because I think it's going to affect all of us very, very significantly.
Right.
And I'd rather be at the forefront of that than the person, staring at everybody else running ahead of me.
No, I agree with you. I think the thing that I feel like I get emails every day from these new groups that are popping up, and they want to meet with you, or they want to pitch some idea that they have. And
like podcasts?
No, this is much more of a stable, interesting opportunity. But I think, you get these these people that call you, often, and I think that it's hard to decipher what's valuable and what's not, and take the time out of your day to understand what that is. And I think that you'll see, you're seeing more of them because some of them are really making some real money. So there are real groups that are coming in.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a really good segue into our next question, which is not about the tenant side of the brokerage side, but about the landlord side and what landlords will have to do to recruit the best tenant populace. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the major trends and the major attractors that landlords are going to have to keep up with? Some that Oxford is doing, some that many of the major landlords are doing, but some that others aren't doing. What do you think are the major amenitizations and trends that landlords are going to have to instill in their buildings in order to continue attracting the top tenant population?
Especially with all the big blocks of space coming available. You know, I think that a lot of people are going to be in for a rude awakening if they don't adapt.
With the flight to Hudson Yards and new construction and quality, a lot of buildings are getting left behind, and those buildings are going to have to really step up their game in order to, you know, meet their pro forma.
Sell them to Oxford and they'll redevelop it.
Well, I think the world's changing. It's not, I think the first and foremost is that it's not an us versus them thing. You know, it used to be a landlord tenant and how dare you try to lease space in my building kind of mentality, which is kind of ridiculous to me. It always seemed ridiculous to me that people would have that kind of view. You know, we're welcoming. We want people to come in and be a part of what we have. We realize that this, in a lot of ways, isn't their primary business. So let's make it as easy as we can to help you digest it and understand it, and offer opportunities to help you, you know, grow and be a part of a partnership that we'll have for a long time, hopefully. So that, I think, to me, is the first step. I think from a infrastructure and building perspective, I think it's different strokes for different buildings, right? And it's understanding what you have. If you think that it's a cookie cutter thing that, okay, we're going to buy this building, we're going to redo the lobby, we're going to put in a gym, we're going to, paint the mullions, and we're going to sell it, like that doesn't work for every building. Right. And so I think that it's going to take savvy developers, savvy operators to extract the real proposition for each one of those different types of assets, because everyone now gets the joke, right? And every building has to get upgraded to play now. And, you know, there is in terms of the lobby has to look good. It can't look like it's from 1970 anymore, you know, and then you layer on to other things. What kind of amenities, what kind of infrastructure, you know, maybe the windows of the building can't be improved, but, you know, you can do other things that create different value for particular tenants. There are tenants that don't care about the view, and that care about other things. So how do you go and, you know, touch on those different things? And I think a lot of it is just kind of being creative and keeping your eyes open to what is happening out there and understanding what businesses want, because then you can target what you can do and what you can sell. And I don't know if that's giving you the right answer, but that was perfect. You know, wasting your money on creating things that are not valued is a waste of money.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Adam, this was awesome. Your final question. Much. So tell us overall, what's really going on in New York City commercial real estate from an owner and developer's perspective?
I think that it is incredibly difficult to go buy, you know, great development sites right now. I think that there are a lot of people seeking those things out, but clearly there is a lot of demand for new, right? The market is seeking new product. It is seeking the things that you just asked about, which is great assets that meet the needs of their businesses. I think there are a lot of people coming to New York because the talent wants to be here. Because the talent is here and because the talent wants to be here. And I think that we will continue to see some great things happening in the city as that demand continues to roll. I think that it is important that everybody has their eye on what's happening out there in the world. You know, there's a lot of different things happening with the election, you know, geopolitical news. There's, with obviously the health scare that we have out there, what kind of impact will that have on the market, if any? And nobody really knows, obviously, but those are all things that we are trying to keep our eye out for.
One last question: Sunnyside Yards.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there in terms of the redevelopment, and obviously with all the success that you folks have had over at Hudson Yards? Do you think that's an imminent project on the forefront that you'd want to have a bite at the apple in?
I'm on a train every day going to Long Island, and I go by Sunnyside Yard every day, and I've done that for the last 12 years. And so that area is just kind of talks to me. I just think that it's incredible. I wish that, we had that big tenant sign a deal over on the other side of the river, because it would have changed. I think that my view maybe would have been a little different, at least today.
Yeah.
But it is so incredible. It's so close to the city, to have a blank canvas. And how many apartments are there over there? There's like 15,000.
I think it's like 20 and change now. I live there, so I live in Court Square.
Oh, yeah.
And I look at it every single day. And I think about you every single day. And I'm like, that's going to be Oxford and related. That's going to be Boston Properties. But all kidding aside, I really look at it as just so much opportunity for the real estate world, but more importantly, from a job creation standpoint.
Totally.
And, from a workforce standpoint.
Well, transportation and infrastructure, it seems to be there. And I think that it is an opportunity, and it is amazing because the buildings that are there, it's to your question earlier, all those apartments that are built, it seems like I was saying this to myself 10 years ago. And now I say, wow, look at how much is built here now. And there's so many people that I know that live there and that love it. And I'm trying to understand when, someone's going to make some move, and then all of a sudden, the deal we were just mentioning, and all of a
For
sudden
those who don't know,
all
it's Amazon.
Yeah. So, I think that it will. It's an exciting thing to watch.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. So, Adam, this was great.
Thank you so much.
Hey,
Thank you.
I really appreciate you guys having me, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
All right.
Definitely.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All righty.
Thanks.